Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to those of you on Zoom. Welcome to those of you on Facebook, on YouTube. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We'll get started in just a moment. Welcome, everyone, joining us here this afternoon to essentially talk about dinosaurs. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just another minute or so. Wait for everyone to join us on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube. Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome everyone. We'll get started in just one more minute here. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll wait one more minute. There's still people coming in, probably joining us on our Zoom, on our YouTube, on our Facebook. Everyone excited to come talk about dinosaurs. Well, good afternoon, dinosaur enthusiasts. I'm Dr. Susan Heilman. My pronouns are she and her, and I work on the community engagement team at the Museum of Science in Boston, and I'll be your host this afternoon. First, just a few housekeeping items. If you would like closed captions, we are working to get those soon. If you see them appear at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to click on that CC button there. If you would like to ask questions, you can use the Q&A button. That's probably also located at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be adding some information for you in the chat feature. So you won't be able to chat yourselves, but we'll be able to share some information with you that might be helpful as we. And by the way, I didn't mention yet, but I am a huge dinosaur enthusiast myself. Although my formal training and PhD is in molecular biology, I never really outgrew my childhood love of dinosaurs. Hence the dinosaur t-shirt, leggings, and socks that I'm wearing right now, but you can't actually see. I've also been lucky enough to join several paleontologists on a few digs out in Wyoming for the past few summers. And normally, if you want to find dinosaur bones, you have to go out west for some of the biggest ones. And we get a lot of questions at the museum, can we find dinosaur bones here in Massachusetts? And unfortunately, we can't find that many. They're really few and far between. The hard rocks we live on aren't great for fossilization, and not to mention by the fact that it's mostly covered by either civilization or by forests. But there are a few dinosaurs that have been discovered in Massachusetts, and we're going to hear more about them today and how to make one of them the official Massachusetts state dinosaur. So first, we're going to hear from Representative Lewis for some background on the project. Then two paleontologists will share more about each of the two dinosaurs. And then we'll get the winner announced and learn what happens to the dinosaur next to actually make it official. And then finally, at the end, we're going to field some of the questions that you might have, either about dinosaurs or about this legislative process that we're all now a part of. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the mastermind of this initiative, fellow dinosaur enthusiast, Representative Jack Patrick Lewis.
Thank you so much, Susan. Mastermind, I could get used to that descriptor. It is great to be with everyone this evening. As Susan said, my name is Jack Patrick Lewis, and I have the great honor of serving as a state representative in the Massachusetts House, representing the communities of Ashland and Framingham. In addition to helping pass laws, advocating for my communities, and connecting constituents to essential state services, one of my favorite aspects of this job is to speak with young people about the legislative process, the role of government, and the potential power of our collective communal efforts. Earlier this year, while I was working for the upcoming plan for my youngest kid's Cub Scout den, I came across a scouting project all about fossils and dinosaurs. And as you might expect, as someone who has long loved dinosaurs, my mind quickly got a moving. It's been several decades since I dreamed, like maybe so many of you, of being a paleontologist when I grew up. That love of the prehistoric world, though, has taken me to dig sites in Utah and Australia, volunteering in the paleontology lab in my college, and to opening night every single time when a new Jurassic Park movie came out. So as you can imagine, this was a very exciting project for me to explore with my Cub Scout den. In that research, exploring how I could make dinosaurs more accessible for the second graders I was working with, especially in the midst of this pandemic, I came across a fact that 12 states had already declared an official state dinosaur. I also learned that Massachusetts had not declared an official state dinosaur. I immediately wrongly made the wrong connection that we had not discovered any dinosaurs right here in Massachusetts. So I reached out to several wonderful paleontologists, two you're going to hear from very shortly, who quickly corrected me about the fact that we have discovered two species, two very important species here in Massachusetts. So overnight, the idea sprung out of seemingly nowhere and took flight to higher heights than I ever could have imagined as we began to explore what it would mean to work with young people in my community and your community as well, and to declare an official Massachusetts state dinosaur. My original hope was to help local school kids understand the legislative process, but the interest has come from every corner of this Commonwealth because of the great partnerships with folks at the Museum of Science and so many other museums and paleontologists. Today, we're celebrating those two dinosaurs that have been discovered here in Massachusetts. And soon we're going to be announcing which one won our poll over the last several weeks. I continue to hope that this helps us all better understand the legislative process and to strengthen our study and funding of vital fields of science. Back to you, Susan.
Thanks, Jack. So thank you very much. And now to learn more about each of the contenders, we have Dr. Mark McMenamin from Mount Holyoke College to talk about Podokesaurus holyokensis. And we have Fred Venn from Amherst College to talk about Ankylosaurus polyzelus. Mark, why don't you get us started?
I'd be glad to, Susan. Welcome, everyone, and thank you to Representative Jack Lewis for getting this initiative started. Very exciting. This is a big event for the paleontological community, as well as for residents of Massachusetts. Really very wonderful that we have two really interesting and fascinating dinosaur species, Podokesaurus holyokensis and Ankylosaurus polyzelus as our two candidates in this election. The winner will be revealed shortly. So very, very exciting. And I want to say a few words about Podokesaurus holyokensis. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mark McMenamin, professor of geology at beautiful Mount Holyoke College here in South Hadley, Massachusetts. And my predecessor here at Mount Holyoke was Dr. Minion Talbot, who taught at Mount Holyoke College from 1904 to 1935. And she was both the discoverer and the describer of Podokesaurus holyokensis. And here's a picture of her. There she is. I have a framed picture of my predecessor here at the college. We never had a chance to meet, unfortunately. I wish I could have met her. But she made this tremendous find, tremendous discovery of the Podokesaurus specimen. And I'll show you her original photograph of the skeleton that she found. So I'm going to screen share here. There we go. There it is. There is the skeleton that was originally found by Minion Talbot and then described as the dinosaur Podokesaurus. Here is a model that was constructed by Richard Lull in 1912, 1 year after the discovery and the description. And I can't emphasize how big a step forward this was for women scientists and women in STEM. This is the first dinosaur described by a woman, a geoscientist. And this is an incredible milestone to have the paper published in the very famous journal, American Journal of Science, way back in 1911. So Minion Talbot is very much a pioneer for science, women's education, women's contribution to science and STEM. And so we're very proud of her here at Mount Holyoke because of that. But furthermore, she found just a really neat dinosaur that is going to be important as we learn more about dinosaurs and the relationships between the different types of dinosaurs. So that was the 1912 reconstruction. Let me show you something that is a little more modern. Here is a head not of Podokesaurus, but of the dinosaur Coelophysis, which some paleontologists believe is a close relative to Podokesaurus. We're not quite sure yet because we haven't yet found the skull. So there is more work for us to do here in Massachusetts in terms of keeping our eyes open in case something comes out of the ground or a particular slab of rock splits open with a dinosaur inside of it. That's exactly how Minion Talbot found the original skeleton of Podokesaurus. We have to be ready because we know that additional skeletal material is in the ground waiting for us to discover. I find that very exciting. I hope you find that exciting too. And the fact that we're soon going to have our own state dinosaur is really quite exciting. And other states like Colorado, for instance, have Stegosaurus, and you might be able to see the shiny Stegosaurus here on my tie. So if Colorado has Stegosaurus, Massachusetts needs its state dinosaur as well. So I'm very excited that Representative Lewis has brought us here to work on that project. Thank you again. Okay, Susan, I think I'm going to turn it over to Fred now.
There we go. So welcome to the Benesky Museum of Natural History at Amherst College. My name is Fred Venn. I have the honor to work within this environment and work with people like Mark. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention right off the bat is that finding fossils is citizen science. We're all involved. And I think what I'd like to do is talk about our other dinosaur for a moment that we're looking at. And the other dinosaur is it started out as a citizen science project. I'm going to do that by bringing up some images here. Let me start, see if I can screen share. There we go. So here you have our other dinosaur that was found in Massachusetts, the Ankylosaurus, or near close to being a lizard, Polyzous, which is much sought after, AKA, otherwise known as, Megadactys, which is basically a large fingered animal. And you ask why? Well, we're going to get into why in a moment, but what I'd like to do is talk about how we got there. Let's see. So it started in 1855. There was work being done at the Armory in Springfield, and the work that was being done is they were developing kind of the water area. And you can see the images up there of the area, the Armory today and the Armory back in the day when the work was being done. And as the work was being done, they were kind of blowing things up. And a gentleman named William Smith, who was coordinating some of that work, he was out there checking, and he noticed the fossil that you see in the lower, corner of the image. And he thought, geez, that's kind of curious. They stopped the work. He contacted the superintendent of the Armory. The superintendent of the Armory was a general because it was an armory, and the General Whitney ordered that any remaining fossils, anything else that was found in there, was to be passed on to Edward Hitchcock. Edward Hitchcock was a professor of geology at Amherst College, but more importantly, he was the third president of the college. And he happened to know General Whitney because they lived pretty close to one another in Massachusetts back in the day. Well, he was also the state geologist at one point. This was the person to bring a rock to. So that specimen was brought to Hitchcock. Hitchcock examined it, published on it in 1855, not long after, in November of 1855, he published in the American Journal of Science and Arts that was run by Benjamin Silman, and Hitchcock then gave the fossil to a Harvard professor, Professor Jeffries Wyman, who studied under Richard Owen at one point in England. The remains included 11 vertebrae, most of a hand, and you'll notice it on the next slide, look carefully at that hand, and then a partial pelvis and a little bit of a hind limb. So you can see the images that are in front of you now. In 1857, some of what Wyman wrote after looking carefully at that specimen, every bone, and I'm quoting here, every bone except the vertebrae and perhaps the small phalanges is hollow. Nothing of its kind is known in Mammalia. Among reptiles, the pterodactyl had hollow bones. And he went on to say that the remains of the foot indicated that the toes were disproportionate sizes, there being one large to associate with the three quite small ones. And the claw of the large toe was very strongly recurved. And you can see that curvature that's in the image there. When Professor Wyman sent his notes on to Amherst College President Hitchcock, he and his son, Hitchcock's son, Doc Hitchcock, corresponded with Sir Richard Owen regarding the discovery in the early 1860s. Edward Hitchcock passed away around 1864, but his son followed up by traveling to London in 1865 and then met with Owen. Owen advised him to name the find a new genus. Owen suggested the name Megalodactys, meaning large finger, in reference to the enormous limb, that thumb on the animal. Hitchcock Jr. himself then chose the specific name Polyzaeus, much sought for. And the reason he did that, referring to the fact that his father had for many years in vain sought to discover the identity of who made all the footprints in and around our valleys, because we didn't have many bones, as was mentioned earlier. And this, much sought after was important to him. And then in 65, Edward Hitchcock Jr. described the Springfield remains in the supplement to his father's final work on fossil footprints, suggesting that they could explain a certain mysterious kind of reptile. Unfortunately, at the time, no further efforts were made to connect the tracks of the Connecticut River Valley with the track maker. However, if you look at that picture, one of the things I did forget to mention is that that picture was drawn by Emily Hitchcock. This was Edward Hitchcock's daughter, and captured it, much like her mother before her, Ora White Hitchcock. In the convening years since, both Hitchcock and Hitchcock Jr. outlined he worked with the fossil bones. O.C. Marsh changed the name to Ankylosaurus in 1885 because Megalodactys was already in use, and the most recent research was done by paleontologist Yates and Fernandez in 2010 and 2016, respectively, both conducting anatomical studies of our specimen. Some updates to the characteristics of the bones were had, and their features were noted by both researchers, but Ankylosaurus designation as a basal, sauropodomorph still rings true. What does that mean? Well, recent investigations show us that the group of traditional prosauropods form a monophyletic, basically a sister group to Sauropodia, and that the Ankylosaurus is instead closer to sauropods. So in other words, our Argentinosaurus, this great, huge animal, is basically the great grandson or granddaughter of our Ankylosaurus. And if you're worried about numbers, great is about 1 million each. About 10 million each for a great. And bring back Mark, and if we can bring up our other screen, we can take a look at those fossils right next to each other.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. That was a great introduction to Ankylosaurus. Okay, here Fred is showing us Amherst College specimens. On the right, you see there a cast of the original Podokesaurus skeleton. We have its torso preserved, part of its tail, and some other bones next to the tail. Unfortunately, we don't have the skull, but we do have the vertebral column preserved here in the thorax area. And we also have the hip region preserved. And we've got the hind limb bones here, the femur and the tibia and fibula are preserved, and also the pubis bone is preserved in there as part of the animal. Okay. Let's zoom in on this. Okay, there we go. This is a very nice image of the original skeleton. This is a cast of the skeleton. Unfortunately, the skeleton itself was destroyed. The actual fossil specimen was destroyed when Williston Hall at Mount Holyoke burned to the ground in 1917. And I have a photo to show you in a minute of a very sad photo of Mount Holyoke students and faculty picking over the rubble, trying to find the Podokesaurus specimen. They were not successful. Apparently it was destroyed in the fire, but fortunately we have these good casts of the fossils, so we can still say quite a bit about what that dinosaur looked like. And we actually have a lot of bones there. This is the Podokesaurus is the most bones that we have of any particular dinosaur from Massachusetts. Okay, I'm going to screen share for just a moment and show you. Here is the aftermath of the fire at Williston Hall in 1917. And Minion Talbot, the discoverer, is right here. And you can see her sadly picking over the rubble from the collapse of the building. Some wooden boards have been put up to prevent further collapse of the remains of Williston Hall. It was very sad. We had an entire paleontology and geology museum in there, and it all burned to the ground.
Well, thank you, Mark and Fred, for giving us some background on each of those dinosaurs. It really is a shame about losing those. So it just means, though, that we need members of our audience to try even harder to find some more. We'll need to find some more of the Podokesaurus, more Ankylosaurus as well. One or two, even if they had survived, that's not enough. We need to find some more Massachusetts dinosaurs. But now we have the moment that we've all been waiting for. Rep Lewis, do you want to come on and tell us who the winner is?
Oh, thank you so much. Let me first just say how grateful I am to everyone who voted and shared our poll. I'll admit, when I sent out that tweet a couple weeks ago, asking for folks to vote in a poll to help me decide which dinosaur I was going to try to insert into state law, I didn't expect this kind of response. And I am so, so grateful for it. I went to bed that first night and I tweeted, we have 150 votes. Project is off to a great start. And I woke up the next morning with a press inquiry from CNN, an article on Huffington Post, and every other news outlet you can imagine in Massachusetts wanting to talk about the idea of a state dinosaur. And I know that wouldn't have been possible without all of you voting and sharing our poll. And to parents and grandparents, caregivers, and teachers, thank you so much for engaging your kids in this project. This is only the beginning. So know that we're going to be talking a lot about these dinosaurs over the next several months. I also hope that you're all having as much fun as I'm having and the folks at the Museum of Science and our great paleontologists. But now for an announcement that has been eons in the making, with more than 60% of the 35,000 votes cast. Again, over 60% of the 35,000 votes cast, the Podokesaurus holyokensis is our official candidate to be named the Massachusetts state dinosaur. Woo, if we were all gathered together, there'd be a loud... I'm excited. I've been rooting for this one from the beginning, and I know our friends at Mount Holyoke have been as well. But again, this is only the beginning of this project. Over the next couple of months and years, I'm going to be working with my colleagues and the great people at these museums to make sure that we connect the dots between this project that we've all engaged with over the last couple of weeks and fields of science, that we learn more about Mingdon Talbot and her contribution to paleontology, that we help to engage young girls in fields of science that maybe they haven't been engaged in the same way before. We're going to learn about prehistoric Massachusetts together. We're going to learn about the other animals that lived at this time. And because of this increased energy and attention, I wouldn't be surprised if we discovered new dinosaurs over the next couple months and years here in Massachusetts and around the region. And if any of that happens, this will have been a win. But we're all gathered here today because we want to have an official state dinosaur. So we know what that dinosaur is going to be. And moments ago, my colleagues and I filed the legislation to insert into Massachusetts law, naming the Podokesaurus our official state dinosaur. So now, we hope that you will join us in reaching out to your state representative and state senator and asking them to co-sponsor, to lend their name to these two bills, these two proposed laws to Massachusetts state law. And if more and more of our colleagues lend their names, it increases the chances that we will be able to officially name the Podokesaurus our official state dinosaur. So there are two bill numbers, and we're going to share these on social media. We're going to share them with the press, and I think we're going to share them in the chat as well. But HD 1392 and SD 698, they might not roll off the tongue, but I promise you, if you reach out to your state rep and your state senator and you ask them to co-sponsor the state dinosaur bill, they all know what we're talking about, and you don't actually probably need to remind them of the bill numbers. If you've never reached out to your state rep before, if you've never thought you had a reason to, let this be your first opportunity. There should be a link that was just shared where you type in your address and you learn who these people are. Reach out, send them a short email. It doesn't have to be long. Hi, my name's Jack. I live in Framingham, and I hope that you'll co-sponsor the state dinosaur bills. Thank you so much, Jack. It can be that simple. And my hope is that that connection you've made with your state rep and your state senator is one that you can maintain. Down the road, if you have an idea for a state law, or if down the road you or your family needs help with unemployment benefits or with health insurance, it's the same people at the state that I'm asking you to reach out to now to support and co-sponsor our state dinosaur bill. I am so excited for this project. I'm so excited for the partnerships I have with all of you. And I'm so excited that together we're going to do everything possible to name the Podokesaurus our official state dinosaur. And I know that I can keep counting on your support. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you. That's really exciting. And you can stay tuned to the progression of the bills on the Massachusetts State Dinosaur Facebook page. And of course, the Museum of Science is going to be keeping you posted as well. And between now and then, don't forget we have our dinosaur exhibit at the museum that you can visit when we open again on Monday, February 8th. Reserve your tickets now. Including we have several of our own Massachusetts fossils and replica fossils. Cousin of Podokesaurus is there. We have some footprints, all from Western Massachusetts. Of course, we also have Cliff, who you can see behind me, not from Massachusetts. He's a transplant though. Just like I'm a transplant from New Jersey. He's a transplant from North Dakota. He lives here now as well. We have some great podcasts about dinosaurs. If you visit our Pulsar, a podcast about whether or not dinosaurs are actually still around today. And Now we do have some time for some questions. We've been getting them in as we go, and I'll grab a few of those to give to our guests here today. But I'll start with the most obvious question that anyone could ask. What is your favorite dinosaur? Mark and Fred.
Go ahead, Fred.
Well, my favorite, let me see. It is the sauropod, but it's not the one we think of. But I love the whole idea of the Titanosaurs, which is kind of the generic for all of the large ones, whether it's the Diplodocus or if it's the Argentinosaurus. I love the Titanosaurs. I just think they're amazing, and I just want to show you one of the fun things about these.
Oh, is that a gastrolith?
Gastrolith, yeah, it's a wonderful gastrolith from Wyoming, just huge. I mean, this is a big one. This is actually larger. This one gastrolith, which is a stomach stone, it helped to help digest food. Dinosaurs did this, but birds do it today. I mean, our living dinosaurs that live today, they take these and help to grind up the food. This is one of what was a pile of about a ton of stone that was found very close to where this animal died. But isn't that cool? Look at the size of that one. All
That's
nice.
very nice. I really like it.
And Mark, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Well, I was very delighted when Moz was able to obtain Cliff, because my favorite dinosaur is the Triceratops. And that is such a wonderful specimen that you have at Boston Science. It's an incredible specimen. It looks like it was dead only a few years ago. So Triceratops is my favorite, and Cliff is my best buddy now.
He is. He's amazing. 70% real, including that skull of his on top, over a ton, just the skull alone. It's amazing.
That is a connoisseur's dinosaur.
Yes. So we've gotten a bunch of questions. Oh, Jack, do you want to tell us yours? I wasn't sure if you were going to come back on. Tell us yours.
Yes.
I went in the basement and found my childhood toys that my kids completely rejected, even though my mom did such a good job preserving them. But the Protoceratops was my favorite up until about 5 minutes ago. And now I think it has to be the Podokesaurus, which is not this guy, but I'm going to pretend it's this guy from my childhood. I think that's about the same thing.
Podokesaurus.
We'll help you.
It'll pass.
Wait, I'm going to grab mine. Hold on. I
How
have
about
one.
you, Susan? You need to share your favorite.
Okay. We've all got our sauropods here. Excellent. So we got some great questions in the chat. A couple of them really interesting about how do we know what Podokesaurus and Ankylosaurus, for that matter, what they looked like on the outside. We saw a few kind of artists' impressions. How do we know, Podokesaurus often has like that featheriness, Ankylosaurus doesn't. How do we know, and the colors and the textures of their bodies, how do we know that?
Oh, well, let me try to answer that question. We know that the theropod lineage, generally speaking, the carnivorous dinosaurs are closely related to birds. In fact, birds are descended from a type of Maniraptoran theropod. And these creatures are all, or at least many of them, thought to be feathered. So there are feathers on this type of dinosaur. And so even T-Rex, even the mighty Tyrannosaurus, it's thought had feathers of some sort. And in fact, some of the new Chinese material of relatives of T-Rex actually have feathers preserved in the fossils. So since Podokesaurus is a predatory dinosaur, it's a carnivore, it's possible that it is a distant ancestor of the tetanurans like Tyrannosaurus and so forth. But the research is ongoing to find out whether that connection is really solid. It's possible that Podokesaurus is just its own branch of carnivorous dinosaurs, not directly related to the Allosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus and so forth. But it's entirely plausible that Podokesaurus had feathers covering all or part of its body. It was a fairly small animal that could have used them for thermal regulation. So for the paleo artists, I would definitely endorse a feathered pelt or integument for the Podokesaurus. The Ankylosaurus, on the other hand, as Fred Venn so nicely pointed out, has more of a connection to the sauropod dinosaurs, which are thought to have a less of an expression of the feathered integument. Some of the paleo art these days shows feathered quills popping out in places on them, but especially the very large ones would have not have needed feathers either for flight or for thermal regulation because of their thermal inertia. They wouldn't need to have any kind of insulation because they were so large. So it's not impossible that there were feathers on Ankylosaurus polyzelus, but probably less likely on that dinosaur than it was for Podokesaurus. Fred, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that, there's very limited evidence that's been found. Of course, the fossil record, you saw it. We have literally 2 fossils, very few fossils related to these 2 creatures. However, that being said, there are lots of what we call trace fossils, and here, I'm just going to hold one up with some little, marks in it. Some of our trace fossils in our collection at the Benesky Museum have in them what Paul Olson, a colleague of, Mark's out of Columbia, who has come in and he looks at those marks and those trace marks, and he's determined what he strongly believes are some feather marks within the substrate, within the ancient muds. And it's those feather marks that, again, indicate the thermal regulation, so on and so forth. But most importantly, it's tying those footprints into potential body fossils, like the bones we found, and tie the 2 together that say these prints were made by this critter. And therefore, if that critter sat down or laid down in the mud, then those little marks over there may very well be feather marks.
That's very well put. In fact, it's an exciting scientific question to try to link the tracks to the track makers. And so that's like job 1 for Massachusetts dinosaur paleontology. Who was making these tracks? There's a larger track called Eubrontes, and we're not sure which dinosaur made it. Probably a carnivorous dinosaur, possibly something like Dilophosaurus. But we really want to find those skeletons. The skeletons are in the ground, and we have to be pretty proactive if we have an opportunity to do some excavating, maybe during the early stages of a building project or something like that. We should go in there fairly aggressively and see what we can find. There are more bones in the ground, I guarantee it.
I think you've got some volunteers that are on this video chat right now. I think people are already, they're talking about whether or not there would be more out there. Some people were wondering about getting a 3D model or 3D model scan of the Podokesaurus to make action figures, or maybe for further scientific study. I feel like both of you would be on board for something like that if possible. Yeah.
I would be happy to arrange for that. In fact, we have a new makerspace at Mount Holyoke, the Fimble Lab, and we're actually looking for items to use with our new photogrammetry and Artex spider scan systems. So maybe task 1 will be to make a 3D rendering of the Podokesaurus, the 1912 Podokesaurus. I'll get on that right away.
And I'm just going to say to Mark right away, don't forget Stephen Gatesy out of Brown. Tap them that they've been working on getting these 3D models of much of what we have in our collection, and they're online now. It's amazing what is possible. And Olson's been doing that as well. But I think there's enough of an interest in a team of colleagues that are working on this that it's very doable.
It really is. So yes, let's make those connections and make it happen.
So some people are wondering a little bit more about some of the background between the 2 dinosaurs. You may have mentioned this, but things like around what time period did they live? So how long ago? But then also, how long did these dinosaurs live over the span of history, but also at a time? So how old would a dinosaur have been? 5, 10, 20 years old?
These are great questions. The dinosaurs we're talking about here, the Ankylosaurus and the Podokesaurus, are early Jurassic in age. So they're somewhat older than the more classic dinosaurs of late Jurassic time. and Cretaceous time, like Cliff. So we were early in the age of dinosaurs, and this was a fabulous time in Earth history, the late Triassic going into the early Jurassic, because the famous global supercontinent of Pangaea, which had formed at 300 million years ago, began to break apart at about the time that these dinosaurs were alive, around 180, 160 million years ago. So the supercontinent was breaking apart. So they're in a world that's changing rapidly. A giant supercontinent is breaking into pieces, and yet all the land masses are connected. So dinosaurs were able to range very widely. And so we think that there are real similarities to these dinosaurs and dinosaurs in other parts of the world. But we really need more skeletal material to say more about those relationships. Go ahead, Fred. You have something to add?
No. I was just listening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see some great questions here. Benjamin Jiang asked, "Are most Massachusetts fossils found by chance?" I would say yes. Many of them are. There are. I know of a few localities, mostly along the shore of the Connecticut River, where the river has cut down and exposed the bedrock, where you could find fossils on a fairly regular basis. But these are usually small things, fragments of the plant material that the dinosaurs would have been feeding on, a type of juniper-like plant called a Chirolepidacean. We've also found some cycad leaves and other things. But the dinosaur material, skeletal material, is very rare, and we clearly haven't looked in exactly the right place yet. I think that there are a part of the problem actually is the loss of the Podokesaurus holotype in that 1917 fire, because if we still have the rock, we could see exactly what kind of rock it is, and that would be a guide to finding more of them. So we're a little bit there's a little bit of a stumbling block here for us, because we don't know exactly which rocks to prospect in. So the next dinosaur skeletal fragment that we find is going to be an important one. It will act as a guide to finding many more. And I'm fairly certain that if we look in the right place, if we excavate in the right place, not only are you going to find one dinosaur, there's probably a bone bed down there with dozens of dinosaurs that were caught up in a flash flood or something like that. It's just waiting for us to be discovered.
And I just want to add, it's all the citizen scientists. It really is. Many of the major finds, whether they're local or around the world, they're found by the farmers. They're found by the construction workers. They're found by the highway people that are actually working in the land, digging things up for other reasons. And it's those with that eye for something that just noticed something. Mm-hmm. And it was like, even the one in, Springfield, 1855, it was noticed by a lawyer. Now the lawyer doesn't have training in this. He just happened to notice and thought it was curious, brought it to the attention of who he thought knew a lot more. It's that the classic case of, what you know what you don't know, and you know who to contact if you have a question. And these were the people that are finding the things. They're just in the right place at the right time as things are being broken up. It's the citizen scientists. It's the people that are here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Citizen scientists are going to be critical for this effort.
Yeah, that's a great ending to this part here. I'll ask one more question. I'll save it for Rep. Lewis, though. But thank you, Mark. Thank you, Fred, for joining us and sharing your obvious enthusiasm for all things dinosaur and prehistoric, of course. I'll end with one final question with Rep. Lewis here. And that is, so I was going to ask a legislative question, but a lot of people were asking about how to do a dig if you're not a paleontologist. So I'll just quickly say, I emailed a paleontologist and said, hey, can I do a dig with you? And you can actually, Wyoming has tons of them. You can go out to Wyoming, to Montana, you can join different ones. But Rep. Lewis, do you want to talk about the one that you did? Because that sounded cool too.
So in college, I took a World of Dinosaur class. And so we did a field trip. So that was, I think, my first experience. But it was a couple summers back. My family had the great opportunity to go to Australia. And in reading about the trip, I came across this site that paleontologists still use on a regular basis but that the area they've sort of moved on from, they've opened up to anyone who purchases a permit. So my family giving me a lot of flexibility and freedom, cashed in on a lot of that. Let us drive 5 days into the outback in an RV so that I could spend 6 hours in the middle of the desert with my hat and my tools. And we found some seashell fossils. They're literally over there still. But it was a great experience. But to Susan's point, there are opportunities out west. And if anyone ever has the chance to go, was it Dinosaur National Monument? It's something right out of a National Geographic special from our childhoods. And of course, right here in Massachusetts, we have plenty of evidence of dinosaur footprints. And so I urge folks to just Google it. They're out in Western Mass. They're very well labeled, and you can go and actually see these things that, as a kid, I would have imagined would have had to have been on the other side of a big glass barricade. But yes, if we can help make any of those connections. But to young people, one of my big hopes of this project is that you can see the connection between ideas of what you might want to be when you grow up, when you're a kid, and to realize that for some adults, those ideas stay with them. And they make a career out of them, like Mark and Fred and so many others. But again, I am just so grateful to everyone's energy around this project. I want to thank a couple colleagues in particular in the State House, Rep. Mindy Daum of Amherst, who is the lead sponsor of the House bill, and then Senator Joe Comerford of Northampton, who is the Senate sponsor of this bill, and then Rep. Dan Carey, who represents the Mount Holyoke area, is going to be that fourth name on this legislation. We hope they're top 4 names, but we're looking for another 196 of my colleagues to sign on. But I couldn't do this without all of you, without the support of Mindy, Joe, and Dan, and so many others. I hope you all know that your state legislature is working so hard through this pandemic to try to connect folks with essential state services and unemployment benefits. And that's not always easy. And sometimes we hit roadblocks, and sometimes there aren't easy answers. But this project has not in any way distracted from that important work. It's given us something to look forward to, for me at least, to do at night when I can't sleep, because the regular aspect of the day job is keeping me up. And so I'm going to continue to invest energy into this with all of you, while continuing to work with my colleagues to make sure that our communities and your families are advocated for and represented. But again, I really hope you take the time, reach out to your state rep, reach out to your state senator. They're all great people. They'll all get back with you, and just engage them in a conversation about this and see where it goes. But to our friends at the Museum of Science, and Mark and Fred and everyone else, thank you for your partnership, and I look forward to the next step in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.
You can come through.
Yeah, Mark, that was fun.
Thanks. Yes.